Ladies and gents, welcome back. That's been almost 2 weeks of inquiry now into the Emergencies Act. And the point of this whole inquiry is to justify why the act was actually invoked in the first place. And well, so far we haven't had any of that kind of justification. And today I wanted to bring in Danny Bulford to talk about this in particular. Danny Bulford, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me, Clyde.
I could hear you got some children.
Can you
in the
hear the kids in the background?
Yeah, no, it's
okay,
fine.
Just 1 second.
That's totally fine. It's totally fine. I've got kids, and normally they're the ones. My kids are the ones interrupting the show. No, it's all good. It's all good. So we've heard from law enforcement over the past couple of days, different forms of law enforcement, whether it's intel, and we've heard from the Ottawa Police Service, and so far it seems like nobody's been on the same page. Like, we initially, people watching in on what was going on, we saw you guys were in there, well-oiled machine, came in for a protest, and we just made the assumption that they had good lines of communication, and we had no idea where the breakdown happened. Now, you're from a law enforcement perspective. You're a former RCMP. You've left the service, but what's your opinion on the testimony so far of just how little contact they had with one another?
Well, strictly applying to the law enforcement. Well,
okay, not just law enforcement, but with the council in Ottawa.
Well, I mean, the councillors, the mayor and council, their testimony was what I was kind of expecting it to be, right? A lot of inflammatory language directed towards the protesters, a lot of accusations without really providing any evidence to back it up, which was kind of what I expected, because that was the same type of rhetoric that you were seeing from them during the convoy and since. But I do think that it's a positive. Like, thankfully, it's a positive. We've seen some very articulate and professional testimony from the law enforcement officers who've testified so far. Like, I was driving home from Toronto yesterday evening, while I was listening to Superintendent Pat Morris from the OPP. He was the lead on the intelligence side of the house. And his testimony was just everything that I believed to be true, right? The protest did not meet the criteria of Section 2 of the CSIS Act in any way, shape, or form, from, Section 2, subsection A through D, which would be the requirements for the federal government to be justified in invoking the Emergencies Act. So check, that was done. He said that throughout, when he was referring to his intelligence assessments that were being provided to all of the police services, he outlined that there was no credible threat or no credible intelligence of a specific threat from within the protests. And initially, one of the lawyers tried to get him to, was asking him about that specific thing early on. And his response was, actually, you'll see that throughout. Like, there was no credible intelligence of a legitimate threat or of a specific threat throughout the duration. So it's like, oh, okay, check. We knew that was true. And then he even called out the government officials and the media for sensationalizing their stories and reporting things that were not based in fact. And I don't think we could have gotten any better of testimony reflecting on the protest than what we got from him. And then this morning, Deputy Chief Ferguson from the Ottawa Police Service, she was the overall event commander for the majority of it, based on my understanding of her testimony. She gave, it was clear that there was a lot of frustration and a lot of infighting, and people were disagreeing on, well, I think there was a lot of disagreement from within the police service as to what actions they should be taking against the protest, because you had people that really wanted to strong arm the protest, and then you had other people that were like, whoa, what authority are we acting under here? Like the fuel seizure and the police actions at Coventry Road. Like, it sounded to me, based on the testimony that I heard from Patrick Morris, the intelligence officer, Deputy Chief Ferguson this morning, and then the testimony that I was able to listen to from, I think, Craig Abrams, the other OPP officer that was testifying today.
And we're still
after
going to hear
Chief Ferguson.
cross-examination yet to come for that.
Yeah, he's testifying again tomorrow morning. There was obviously a major discontent from, well, the OPP for certain, like questioning things about like when the political masters were trying to like demand, we need a victory right now to give to the outcrying public. There was still police officers, and sounds like a lot of the OPP anyway, that were like, well, based on what? Like, based on what authority are we going to be taking these police actions? And so it's obvious that it was a very conflicted response from within the different police services working with each other. And I do think, from what I've seen so far, that probably the police chief of Ottawa was feeling the heat big time to do something, even though people in his senior command and within the OPP senior command were still trying to operate within the confines of their lawful authority.
Right. And you mentioned that they were either wanted to go full on or take a peaceful approach. Even the Commissioner Rouleau was mentioned in his questioning at the end of one of the testimonies. Why did it have to be black or white, he was asking. It seemed like they wanted to go full bore or nothing at all. It seemed there was little approach to having some sort of peaceful resolve, which we ended up hearing more about in the following testimony, where it talked about negotiations falling apart and even the goodwill falling apart with an incident involving fuel. Do you know more about that?
Yeah, I think they were referring to the police liaison teams, or the provincial liaison teams, if you're talking about the OPP. Essentially, those were the police liaisons, that almost like negotiators, that were moving around from the different groups that were involved in the protest. They're, maintaining constant communication lines with the protesters, and also, they'd bring issues to us, we'd bring issues to them, trying to negotiate like a balance so that we were all trying to work together to keep it like a peaceful event and make it a success. And I think they were quite reasonable to deal with for the majority of the protest. And we were acting in goodwill. They were acting in goodwill, especially the first 2 weeks for certain. And then after the kind of the forced police action, like that, it sounded like the Ottawa police bent to the political pressure to force a police action at Coventry Road, where they came in and seized a bunch of fuel. And a lot of the police officers were questioning beforehand, like, what authority are we acting under to go seize this fuel? That was a very contentious moment between different levels and the different services, as to like, okay, we've worked very hard to establish a rapport with these people, to earn their trust with these protesters, so that they know that we're going to be true to our word. And after we kind of pull a bit of a strong arm tactic like this, roll in heavy on the Coventry Road camp, and arrest a couple of people for some pretty chintzy accusations,
right?
And then and take all their fuel away, so that they could report back to the mayor and council that, oh, look, we had a victory. But all it did was it just destroyed the trust that those.
So it wasn't a victory
negotiating. No, it wasn't a victory at all. I mean, on two fronts. Number one, it really did damage the trust with the people operating out of the Coventry Road and the other groups that those police liaisons were trying to build a trusting rapport with. But I think, if I remember correctly, almost the very next day, supporters of the convoy just came rolling in with more and more fuel.
Right. And it was,
Yeah.
it was like nothing ever happened. They managed, and we all remember the Spartacus moment when people came in with empty fuel cans just to be kind of like false
Yeah.
flags for the police. And
Kind of
that was an amazing moment.
another act of defiance with a little bit of deception tactics sprinkled in.
A little a funny Canadian
Yeah.
sort of tinge on how to do things. Now, you were involved a lot with the logistics of what was going on down on the scene, and what we've heard a lot in testimony up so far, and you hear a lot of this in the media, is that there was blockades and the lanes were all closed. Nobody could get emergency vehicles in. And from what I understand, you were involved in logistics, and none of that is true. Can you tell me more about what actually was going down on the ground when it came to emergency lanes and making sure that fire trucks and ambulances and whatnot could get through?
Yeah, no, that was a stated priority for both us working as volunteers and the higher profile people that were rolling in, like the faces of the convoy, like Tamara Leach, Chris Barber. And so that was something that we had talked about with the police right away. As soon as I became engaged in that was something that we had discussed with the police liaisons. And as far as I know, almost every street that trucks were on had an emergency lane. There was one location, and I think they talked about it today in some of the testimony. I think there was a small section of Kent Street where they had trucks all the way across. But I think it was the very first night that the convoys arrived in Ottawa. I think right after midnight, I was it was more like 2:00 in the morning. I was in a police cruiser driving around town with one of the road sergeants who had a background in managing these big demonstrations, these big protests. And he was, because we were trying to figure out where we could, possibly condense trucks into some of the more inner downtown core where there was mostly just big vacant office buildings, right? From the majority of buildings down there were empty because of the restrictions and people working from home, the big government buildings and the big office buildings, so that we could bring people that were out in the more periphery, try and backfill them closer into Parliament. And so he was taking me all around, showing me, okay, like this is a no-go, Slater Street and Albert Street and Laurier Street and Bank Street, those are absolute no-goes because they're main primary arteries for buses. And so we were working with the police the entire time, trying to make sure that was a non-issue.
Right. So the narrative that we're all hearing from the media that it was chaos. It was people blocking up all the roads. Every intersection was jammed up. Is not really what actually was happening on the street.
No, I mean, like traffic was, obviously traffic was slowed down because of the volume of vehicles that were there, but we were still able to move around the downtown core the entire time until the police put up all the blockades and established the red zone.
Right. So one last question, just to keep things brief, for the sake of getting these videos out. One last one is just so far in the Emergencies Act inquiry. The whole point of this inquiry is to for them to find justification or prove justification for what it is that they invoked. Your opinion so far, is there justification or even remotely close having been proven here so far?
No, absolutely not. I think the police witnesses have made that very clear.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, Danny, to come in and talk to me. But yeah, just for brevity's sake, I'm going to cut it here, and then we'll have you come in again. And as this inquiry continues throughout the next 20 some odd days we still have left of this. So looking forward to having you back on. Cheers.
Right on, man. Yeah, you bet. Thanks.
And thank you guys for tuning in for this. And again, every day I'm going to try to get something out to you guys, letting you know what's happening with the inquiry, where that's going so far. And I think as we get further into this, we're going to get to see some more interesting testimonies coming forward. We're still yet to hear from the Prime Minister of Canada and his testimony. I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to watching him squirm for that one. Anyway, leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you in the next one. Keep on trucking.